Open your Bibles, Old Testament book of Proverbs, chapter 2. I want to begin reading in verse 1 in just a moment. Catherine and I met each other in college. And many of you know, I was a pre-dental student. And then my freshman year, God saved me and just cornered me and showed me that I'd never been born again, and also called me to preach. And so I, turned away from pre-dentistry and started doing my studies toward getting ready for the ministry, and did a major in speech and a minor in English. And so the first night that I was at the student ministry building there on campus at Southern State College, it's now Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia, there was this girl playing the piano. She had her back to us, but it was one of those pianos, one of those, it's not one of the big upright things, but it was kind of up a little bit, and it had a piece of glass across the front, and so she could see the music director, behind her. She was leading music. Well, anyway, that's how I could see who she was. And I remember that night, I thought, "Gah, I need to know that girl." And little did I know, we met that night, and little did I know that she went home, and she ultimately got out a student directory, and she showed her mother my picture, and she said, "That's the guy I'm going to marry." Now, I did not know that about her, but she knew that about me. All I'm simply saying is, getting married has just been great. Has blessed my life, and Catherine's been exactly what I've needed. God has used her so much in my life. We graduated and came out here to Texas for me to go to seminary right after we got married. And I tell you all that to say that right after we got married, one of our goals was to not get pregnant. And we just wanted time to get to know each other and be with each other and build our relationship and get used to the whole husband-wife home thing. And then, after about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, then we wanted to start having a family, and we couldn't. It just wasn't happening. And so we, just like, well, we'll commit this thing to the Lord. We didn't do any doctor stuff like that or anything, but, we just weren't able to get pregnant. And then it happened, and she got pregnant, and that's when the roller coaster started, and that, from there on out, it's been great. We've got 2 boys. And I say all that, I said all that because I want to know, and just ask you a question this morning, because I'm talking about family. How many of you here this morning have children? You're parents. Raise your hand. You are parents. All right? Put your hands down. How many of you are not parents, but you want to be? Lift your hand up. Let me see where they are. All right, I've got them around. So I've got people in both areas. All right. So everything that I'm going to say is really applicable to, I would say, if not everybody, well over 90 to 95% of you that are here this morning. And so what I want to talk about this morning is what a father does. Because it's hugely important as far as God is concerned about the involvement of the dad in the home. And there is a real work, I believe, because the Bible teaches me that we have an adversary in this world, the devil, who goes around seeking whom he can destroy. And what I want to tell you this morning is, I know there are a lot of divorces that needed to happen. There are many women who were abused and ill-treated There's been rampant unfaithfulness and all of that in the marriage context. And so there are a lot of marriages that were just, divorces like it was the only option. And God does have prescription for where there can be a divorce, where there has been unfaithfulness. But what I want you to understand is, from a biblical perspective, there is also a work afoot. There is an active work, God says, from Satan and all of his demons to destroy the home. Satan wants to destroy the home. He wants to destroy your home. He wants to destroy my home. Catherine and I have had the conversation that the D word will not be part of our vocabulary with each other. We've had some rocky times. Do you know why? Because I'm a man and she's a woman. I could say enough said. But we've had some hard times. She's a different personality from me. That's what attracted me to her when we first got started. She was so different. And then her differentness drove me nuts. And I wanted her to be just like me. But I had to learn she's never going to be like me. And I'm never going to be like her. And when I learned that, and I realized that God had given her to me to complete me, that she made up for my shortcomings and I made up for hers, then I began to realize that she was a gift of God to me, and God wanted me to learn to live with her and to work and do life with her. And what I'm simply saying is there is a desire on Satan's part to destroy your home. Now, that being said, there is a reason why. And listen to me, here it is. And this is like the message of the church. And it is a message for today. There is a work afoot to get men out of the home. And I am not being chauvinistic. I'm not saying that a mother, a wife, cannot be a guardian and cannot take care of the home. I am not saying that. I'm simply saying that from the perspective of our Creator, God intended for the home to have a man and a woman. And what God is simply saying is there is a work for men that the Lord is wanting to reinstate. When we see on television, when we see young men in the street because they don't like something that's going on in our world, and we see them jumping up and down on police cars and turning cars over and throwing rocks through store windows and being basically destructive, I want you to know what you're looking at. You're looking at a young man when he is at home, he is a hellion. There's no young man who's going to jump up and down on a police car, who's going to turn it over, who's going to be throwing rocks or whatever through other people's store windows, who is not a problem at home. And what you are seeing on television, what you're seeing in the streets of America is a reflection of home life. Because you're not doing really, really well at home and then getting out and acting like somebody who has absolutely lost their mind. And so what I'm simply saying is, God is saying Satan is being very successful at splitting up men and women. Some of them, God has okayed the divorce. And that's a whole nother message. But there are a lot of divorces that have happened that God is saying, this is a grief to me, it is a hurt to me, it is a pain to me, and if you would follow me and chase after me, I could heal this. And what Satan is simply wanting to do is he's wanting to get the man out of the home. He's wanting to get the man away. And the reason is because there is something God wants a man to bring to the table, if you will, that a woman simply cannot do. Because God didn't create her to do that. So don't take this is not chauvinistic. And everybody understands that, right? I've done enough explaining. Get you on the table with me on that. All right, here's the deal. Let's read Proverbs chapter 2, verse 1. Now I just want you to listen to what God says here. My son, if you will receive my words and treasure my commandments within you, make your ear attentive to wisdom. Incline your heart to understanding. Because if you cry for discernment, if you lift your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasures. In other words, you've got a son that's being urged by his dad, go after wisdom. Know that there is a wisdom. There is a way to live in this world and to make it and to do well. And God is your resource, and you seek after him. Verse 5, then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God, the God who made everything. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of those who live in justice, and he preserves the way of his godly ones. All right, now listen, here's what I want you to understand this morning. We're talking about what a father does. And what God is wanting us to understand, and what I sought to get across to you at the beginning is this. Men, fathers, dads are important to family and national health. And that's the reason why I shared what I did about some of the things that we're seeing on television, in the news and everything, with just the rioting in the streets and all this and everything. All of that is a reflection of the home. There are a lot of us that are upset with the direction of the country. Would you agree with that? There are there's so many of us. Is there anybody who's not upset? I mean, we just know that the direction our country is going is wrong. But we're not out rioting. But there's so many people who are. And what I'm telling you is that it's a reflection on so many levels of the home life. And here's what God is saying. God is saying that dads are the primary protectors of the moral and the behavioral health of the family, particularly the sons and the daughters. That doesn't mean that women do not influence that. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that men are the primary protectors of the moral behavior of their sons and their daughters. Men are the primary protectors of how children behave that come out of the home. They are absolutely indispensable. Now, last Lord's Day, if you didn't get a copy of the message or you weren't here, let me just give you, there were 3 things that we learned that the dad here in Proverbs chapter 1 through chapter 10 is a dad teaching his son. The major things that a dad needs to teach his son, and that's what we're talking about. And the first 3 things were, number 1, you teach your son to fear the Lord. That means you have a reverential trust that God is holy, God will discipline you. Even if you're out of dad's sight, there is a God in heaven who watches over you and he will discipline you. He has a right to punish you. He is the God who can bless you or he can take blessings from you. And so you want to teach a son to fear the Lord. Why? Because if he fears God, he'll stay away from sin because he fears the Lord. And so the best chance for your son to grow up and have a stable home life is to have a fear of the Lord in his heart. But then there's also to guard their mind, that they guard what goes into their head. They guard what they watch. They guard what they listen to in their earbuds, the music and everything. And you're the primary gatekeeper for your son, what he listens to, what he reads, and your daughter as well. And then number 3, we are the primary ones to teach our children to obey authority. That is absolutely huge, that they learn to obey authority. Why? Because all their life, they're going to be answering to somebody. Would you agree with that? Isn't that the truth? Our sons, our daughters need to learn to follow those who are in authority over them on the job and wherever. And so what God is saying is, dads, it is on our watch that our sons and daughters learn to submit to authority. That is absolutely huge. Let me give you a truth that is my opinion, but I think it's true. All right, it's in your outline. If you got your life point outline, and it is this: there is no excuse for a rebellious child. And I hope that you will embrace that. Whether you have children or you hope to have children, there's no excuse, I don't think, for a rebellious child. Now listen, there are strong-willed children. Would you agree with that? How many of you known a strong-willed child before? I go. So some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are strong-willed children who require a firmer approach. I believe that. But here's what I want to say, and I'll run before I take this back. I think every exasperating, publicly embarrassing, defiant, strong-willed child is so because they're undisciplined. I think it's because they're undisciplined. I don't think it has to be that way. Any child can be taught to respect authority. Any child can be, according to what Scripture says. Proverbs 3, verse 11. My son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord, nor loathe his reproof. In other words, God's going to discipline us. He's going to reprove. He's going to say, you shouldn't have done that. For whom the Lord loves, he reproves. Now listen, even as a father, the son in whom he delights. So God says, do you love your son? Do you love your daughter? He says, if you do, then God says, your Creator says, you will discipline them. Why? Because you love them and you want them to have the best chance at life. And so here's the truth in your outline. Every child has to be taught to obey, and discipline is a must. It's an absolute must. It's going to have to happen. At Proverbs 10, verse 13, a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. He's talking about the backside, the seat of education. Back there. And when your son or your daughter doesn't do what you tell them to do, when there's outright defiance, the proper response of a mom or dad is physical discipline. It's not screaming at them. It's not yelling at them. It's not slapping them. You never slap a child. Screaming and yelling, that's dehumanizing. And so that's not the role to do. You don't scream at your child. You don't yell at them. I know you're going to raise your voice. Lord knows who doesn't. But you don't. The thing is, they need discipline. They need a firm hand. And look at the truth in your outline. Rebellion to your God-given authority is driven from that little heart of a child by a rod of discipline. That's what your Creator says. Now, you're not going to hear that on Good Morning America. When you listen to television, when you listen to the gurus of child psychology, they're going to tell you, oh, you'll warp your child. You will scar your child. No, you'll create somebody when they get mad that potentially will wreck cop cars and throw rocks through windows and do all kinds of things that they shouldn't do. That is potentially what can happen with your son if you don't learn to discipline, because all that is inside of them. That's why they defy you. It's because of sin that's in them. And the only thing that breaks the hold of sin on my life or the life of my son or my daughter is pain. It's the only thing. You just think about it. When you've been living like you took a stupid pill, and you're doing stuff you shouldn't do, maybe you behaved a certain way to your wife or to your husband, or just whatever, and you've been doing life like you shouldn't do. Is it not when you go through a difficult time, it is difficulty that drives you back to the Lord? It is difficulty that drives you back into worship here. When you get out and you're living life the way you want to, you're living large and you're on the lake and you're out in sports and you're traveling or you're just staying home and everything. What is it that brings you back to the house, Lord? What is it that gets you back where once every 7 days you're worshiping the God who made you? You're giving glory to the one who watches over and who blesses your life. What is it that brings you back? So often it is pain. It is when your life begins to come apart. And that is because it is pain that breaks the hold of sin when it gets you in its grip. And that's why God says, discipline your son. The only thing that will drive foolishness out of a boy or girl is discipline. And so discipline conforms your child to wisdom. It'll break their self-will. It'll remove foolishness. It'll deliver them from spiritual death, and it'll make them a delight in your home. Do you agree that children ought to be a delight in the home? Can you say amen to that? Huh? That was weak. Yes, Pastor, yes. Children should be a delight in the home. That's what God says. They ought to be a delight. Now, if delight is not in your home because of your child, what's wrong? What's wrong? Here's the insight. Physical punishment done in love is an effective corrective. I didn't say that. God said that. God said that. All right, so those are the first things. That was the introduction. So let me give you right quickly the message for today. Let me add to those first three things: fear God, guard the mind, and obey authority. Number 4, actually it's number 1 in this message, so you don't get confused. This number 1: choose companions carefully. Dads, we are the primary ones to teach our sons and our daughters when and you start when they're preteens. You start before the hormones get in gear. You start early. in preteen and early teens, it is huge that as dads that we guard who our children, who our sons and our daughters play with, who their friends are, and the groups they become part of. It is huge that you guard that. And here's the insight in your outline. At the top of dad's protection list is dating. So let me just say something. I want you to listen to me. This is absolutely huge. Listen, Dad, you and I, when we've got kids at home, boy or girl, we cannot afford, in this day and age in particular, you cannot afford to be passive when it comes to dating or courting or whatever you're going to do in the life of your son or your daughter. And let me give you a dad maxim, all right? Just kind of a guideline of life for men. Here it is in your outline. Our family, it should be a statement of our family, we never let hormones or hearts overrule our heads. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is this. Girls, your daughter will tend to let their heart overrule their head. And they will get attracted to a young boy that you'll be like, have you absolutely lost your mind? Are you crazy? You're going like, no, absolutely not. But she's just like, oh, because she started thinking with her heart. And so you got to get to her while she's still using her head, before that heart gets involved. And for a guy, you got to get to your son before the hormones kick in. Because when the hormones kick in, the brain checks out. He is looking for anything in the skirt. That's it, just going for a girl. And that means, Dad, that you and I primarily scope out the potential candidates for the lives of our sons and our daughters. Now, I know some young people are sitting there saying, God, I wish I could get Mother and Dad out of here. This is not what I want them to hear. This is so absolutely critical. There are two ways, I think, as dads that we can man up. All right, now, I'm past this, so I'm looking at my grandchildren. As I want you to know, regarding my grandkids, I'm going to have my radar up with regards to this. But here's two ways that we can man up. Number one, be informed. And what I mean by that is that for us as dads, we need to know who the opposite sex kids are in our children's circle. Who's the opposite sex people that they hang around that could potentially be attractive to them? And one of the things that we want to teach our kiddos is we do not date somebody we cannot marry. Now, when you start talking about your child about that, before the hormones kick in, before the girl starts feeling with her heart, what does that mean? We started talking to Joel and Kristen about who they were going to date when they were 7 and 8. So, what? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. 7 and 8. Listen, over the dinner table, we started talking to them that we do not date anybody we cannot marry, because you only are going to marry somebody you date. And so if you can't marry them, you never date them. You just don't do that. And what does that mean? It means that you teach your son or your daughter while they are still young. You teach them the only boy they ever go out with, the only girl they'll ever go out with is a boy or girl who shares the same values as your family does, a boy or girl who is in the same faith that you are in, and a boy or girl who has the same character that you do, that is valuable to your family. That's the only kind of people that you even want them considering. And then number two, not only are you informed about those kids that are out there, but you are involved. And I want to tell you, let me throw something radical out here to you. Because of the day and age in which we live, I want to encourage you as young parents, as moms and dads, I want to encourage you that you start talking to your son or your daughter right now that the first date is going to be at home with the family. In other words, if they want to go out, if they're interested in this boy, interested in this girl, that the first time that they're together, it's at home with the whole family. Introduce them to the whole family. And you bring them over, maybe you're going to have a cookout, or you're going to watch a movie, or you're going to play games. And you, mom and dad, you've got about 2.5, maybe 3 hours to just let that boy or that prospective girl, you get to ask them questions. You get to listen to them talk. Just let them talk. Yeah, talk to me. Just go. Open your mouth. I want to hear what comes out of your mouth. I want to hear what your feelings are. And you watch their behavior. You watch how they behave. And if that boy can't keep his hands off your daughter, it's telling you something right there. And so you're watching it. All right, here's the dating maxim, Dad. Let me just give this. Dad reserves the right. This is what you teach your son or your daughter. Dad reserves the right of refusal on any potential boy or girl. They know that right up front. Before they will go out with you, my beloved, my son, my daughter that I brought into this world, you whom I am footing the bill on, everything that's on your back and it goes into your mouth, everything, if you are driving anything, it's because of me. And I'm going to tell you something, nobody's going to be dating you that doesn't first pass through Dad. Why? Because I love you. And I want you to have a good time. But I'm going to have a good time too. And when you're out, I want to be at peace at home. Does that make sense? Can I get an amen on that? Listen, if you're not at peace, you don't let them go out with them. No. If you have a daughter this age in this day, any potential boy, and I'm going to say this, and I'll run before I take it back. But I think any boy who is potentially going to date your daughter ought to come and ask your permission. Sir, I'd like to date your daughter. Really? Why? Let's have that conversation. Let's talk about that. And, you know, it's not about driving away. It's just about showing that he has got some chutzpah to him, that he, you know, and you let him know right from the beginning. I want you to know, if he passes muster with your daughter, if he passes muster with you, then he needs to understand. And I'll just say this, to me, this totally makes sense, that he understands, you know what? I'm going to let you go out with my daughter, but you understand this. Do not drive up in my driveway and honk the horn and expect my daughter to come out. No. You come up to the door and you ring the doorbell. She is not a car hop. This is not a drive-in. You know, I want you to come up to the door and you greet her and you take her to the car and you treat her like a gentleman. And so one more thought. Let me give you one more thought. Proverbs 18:24. A man of many friends, that's Rhea, comes to ruin, but there is a friend, a Heb, that sticks closer than a brother. Here's what God says I want you to teach your children. I want you to teach your children that life is not about just knowing everybody and being close to everybody. Because there's some people you don't need to be close to. And what God is simply saying is, having a few real good friends is the best way. You want people around you that are loyal, people that are honest, people that hold you accountable and that watch your back. That's the kind of friends you want your daughter to have. That's the kind of friends you want your son to have. It's not that they be friends with everybody in school. That's not a goal. Because there are a lot of friends out there that'll lead your children wrong. But to have good quality friends. And so here's the last truth in that part. Dads are responsible to help sons and daughters choose their friends. And then number two, not only do we watch over the companions they go with, but we help our sons and our daughters to control their bodies. Now that's what Proverbs is teaching a dad to do. That you teach your son to control his body. Every one of us guys understand our son is going to, at some point in his life, he's going to become a hormone-producing factory. And when he does, he needs to already have been taught about being very careful when he is with a young lady, that he is very careful he does not get her or him into a position where it's so private that a mistake can be made because hormones take over. That you want your son to always protect himself. You want him to always be very careful. When Catherine and I were dating in college, there were all kinds of opportunities. We were away from family. Nobody was around. All kinds of things could have happened because I was so incredibly attracted to her, not only emotionally, not only because of her looks, I was attracted to her sexually. And I knew I had to be careful. And one of the things we always did was whenever we were together on a date, we were always with other people, or whenever we came back to the dormitory, I always parked the car underneath a street light. I always parked the car where we were in a public place. Why? Because I knew what I could do. I knew what I could do. And I want my grandsons to know that. I want my grandsons to know, and you need to let your sons know, there will come a time where your hormones will overwhelm you. And you've got to be very careful of that. So here's the truth in your outline. The dominant theme of the first Proverbs is about adultery and sexual immorality. That's why Proverbs chapter 2 talks about the wisdom of God that a father teaches his son, now watch this, about strange women. Now, when he talks about strange women, not talking about, man, that woman is weird. Not talking about that at all. When he talks about strange women, it's talking about a woman who is a foreigner. And what he means is, it is a woman who is away from anything and anybody that could cause her to be mindful about how she's behaving herself. But staying away from a strange woman means you get away from a man or a woman who no longer has any accountability. There's nothing that's holding them in check. And they're in a place in their life where they could be totally morally free to do anything and everything they want to. And so he simply says, you want to stay away, my son, from that kind of woman who has no moral restraint. You need to teach your son, you need to teach your daughter, when you get out of home, when you graduate from college, you're going to be in the workplace. And dad wants you to understand one thing. I guarantee you, there will be women, son, at the job where you're working. Daughter, there will be men where you are working who are married, but they cannot be trusted morally when they're away from their spouse. And you need to understand that. There will be women who belong to another man and they will come on to you. There will be men who belong to another woman and they will come after you, sweetheart, because they cannot be morally trusted. And your children, my grandkids, need to know that. Why? Because God says in Proverbs 6:20, wisdom is given to you to keep you from the evil man or woman. Why? Because anyone who commits adultery with these men or women is lacking sense. He or she would destroy themselves who does it. Now, what is God saying? God is saying there's two things you ought to teach your son or your daughter about adultery. Number one is adultery brings disgrace. When you have sex with another man's wife, when you have sex with another man's husband or another woman's husband, you will bring disgrace on yourself. Why? You are a potential homewrecker, and it will follow you. It will follow you. And number two, adultery will bring a reproach. Bill Clinton will be remembered as long as he lives about Monica Lewinsky. It will follow him all the days of his life. He was a married man fooling with another woman, and it will never get away from it. And I'm telling you, we've got to teach our boys and our girls, there will always be a woman out there, there will always be a man out there who has no morals. And you got to be on your guard. And so here's the truth. Faithful dads teach their sons sexual purity. How you do that? You teach your son, listen, you teach your daughter, you don't let yourself get in a place where you can be sexually compromised. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association years ago, they've gone through all their history and they've never had a moral failure. You know why? Billy Graham and Cliff Barrows and George Beverly Shea got together right at the beginning of their ministry when everything was taking off and God was blessing them. Those three men got together and they developed the guidelines for the Evangelistic Association. And their guidelines were this. Now, this is what they said. For every man in the Billy Graham Association, there will be no meals, no trips, no meetings, no car rides, no elevator rides alone with the opposite sex, ever. It simply is not done. And I want to tell you something. That is the reason why they have never had a besmirch on their name. It is because they simply do not give the opportunity for that to happen. And what I'm telling you today is people are falling, homes are falling apart because many of us were not taught by our parents, or we did not sit under strong biblical teaching where we understood the danger that is out there. And there's not a person in this room, myself included, that put in the right position at the right time is not susceptible to falling. And God simply says we need to protect ourselves. And then the third thing, you need to teach your son to enjoy his wife. Yeah, we need to have, because that conversation with the son or with the daughter, enjoy your husband, enjoy your wife. Proverbs 5:15, drink water from your own well. What does that mean? It means you don't go drinking from somebody else's well. You don't go satisfying your needs from somebody else's well. Here's the truth in your outline. Sexual thirst in a man or a woman is to be met only with the spouse. And from a dad, a son ought to learn, our wives are our best friend. They're the one we run with. They're the ones that we are close to. And she alone will serve my physical needs. And your son needs to hear that from you. Your daughter needs to hear that from you, that it is only with a husband and a wife that you meet those physical needs. And then number four, just some final lessons. There are two things that I think you ought to teach your children. And this is because it's what it's taught in Proverbs, all right? The things a father teaches his son. Number one, guard the mouth. We teach our sons to guard their mouth. Proverbs 4:20. My son, put away from you a deceitful mouth and put perverse lips far from you. In other words, what is he saying? He's saying, do not be a man or a woman of profanity. Do not be a man or a woman who foul things come out of your mouth. Why? Because it's going to open you up to more defilement. God says when profanity comes out of your mouth, you're going to be a blessing loser. You're going to lose the blessings of the Lord. And then he adds this in chapter 10, verse 19. In a multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. One of the things we teach our children is don't always be talking. Nobody wants to be around somebody who can't shut up. Would you agree with me on that? Do you know why? Because I want to talk. And besides that, if somebody always has their mouth open, they drive you crazy. Nobody should be talking all the time. People, you teach your son, people don't need to know everything that you think. Keep your mouth shut and people will think you're smart. If you keep talking, they're going to realize you're not. So you learn to keep your mouth shut. Nobody wants to be around a blabbermouth all the time. It's just not a wise thing. Learn how to keep your mouth shut. Your son needs to understand that. And number two, teach your children to chase after work. To chase after it. Proverbs 6 and verse 6 says, go to the ant. The ant does all of its labor, gathers food for the winter, does everything it does, and nobody's over it. The ants simply do it. So here's what you teach your son. Here, the truth in your outline. Teach your son or daughter to work without supervision. Why? Because if they don't work without supervision, they'll never rise very far. If they're not self-motivated to work and to accomplish and to achieve, they're never going to be what they could be. They'll never rise to their potential.